Good evening, Planning Policy Commission. We're going to start this evening by calling this meeting to order. It's currently 6:30 p.m. Been gone for a month. I think I'm still the chair. I might not be. Anything exciting happened in the last month? Maybe the last 24 hours? No? Okay, we'll get to an email that we all received last night, a little later this evening. But I did want to mention that tonight's meeting is a hybrid meeting. The Planning Policy Commission is in person, but staff or members of the public may be attending virtually or in person. Kristen, do we have a quorum this evening?
Yes, we do.
All right. Got a little housekeeping to get to, and we'll begin with the approval of minutes. So our first item is to take action on those meeting minutes in your agenda packet. Any corrections, any concerns that you may have? Nothing. Okay, going once, going twice. Those meeting minutes are approved. And moving along, we will get to, right now, our public comment. And we're going to hold general public comment at this time. And we're also going to have public comment during our public hearing a little later. Staff, has anyone signed up to make public comments?
No one has signed up, but we do have someone in the audience that would like to make a comment.
Okay. So we'll read some guidelines for those comments, and we do ask that all people that are making public comments that you speak clearly, pause frequently, and state your name before you speak. And if you are attending virtually by computer or by phone, please raise your hand, and please mute your microphone until you are asked to speak. If you're having any technical issues, please try joining the meeting, use a tablet or a different device, or you can also use the call-in information in the meeting invite. This is an important part of the public process. The Planning Policy Commission does take these comments into consideration, and they are part of the decisions that we make. They may be general at this time, and we do ask that people keep them to 5 minutes or less. So if there is someone in the room that would like to speak, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Voice, Vice Chair Patterson, and the Planning Policy Commissioners. My name is Lindsay Walsh. I'm on the City Council, the City Council President, and we always like to come in at the beginning of your terms just to take a moment to thank you so much for all of this hard work. And I want to say it specifically as someone who started out in one of those chairs on the Planning Commission. I know how much work it is for you guys to come up to speed on what a land use code is and then what our land use code is, and to really take in the big picture, long-term projections and vision for the city. And so I really just want to come by and say, I know we're not here all the time because we can't be, but the City Council not only watches your meetings, albeit I will say on 2 times speed because, you know, I'm an efficiency person. But we also pay attention to the evaluations that you've done, the decisions that you've made, and we know that our work and what we adopt eventually is so much stronger because of everything that you have done, the times that you have questioned staff, the times that you have asked staff to come back for more information, recognizing that that's hard to do as a volunteer. That doesn't always come naturally to us. And so I want to thank you for the hours of work that most people don't see, the fact that you read over these huge packets and come prepared with questions is just very, very impressive. And we know that what we see as the end result is stronger because of it. So I just wanted to stop by and say thank you, and we appreciate you.
All right, well, thank you, Council President Walsh. And they are huge packets, and they're only getting bigger. I don't get that, but would anyone else like to speak?
I'm a user of the tree code. I take care of the Talus property, our 90 acres, our 1,300 street trees, et cetera. So I'm familiar with the revision. I like virtually all of what the new code and the revised suggested new code looks like. Quite frankly, I don't think it's gone far enough, though. And let me elaborate. I think in the end, you've got to balance the rights of the residents, the ability to ease of business with the city, and preserving our trees. I think the original Title 18 is completely out of touch with residents. And how much is the executing that code costing the taxpayers and the benefit? Is it really worth it? I just encourage you to simplify, simplify, and simplify. I'll tell you that all trees are not appropriate trees. You know, you've got hazard trees that fall on homes and endanger lives and property. You've got nuisance trees that destroy property. You've got big trees planted in small spaces in some of these communities. You've got resident concerns about wildfires and windstorms. Let's be honest, trees block the sunlight from our homes. So every tree is not a great tree. I mean, I love Issaquah, it's Tree City, but I think the current Title 18 code has gone way too far. I really like some of the revisions. I would say that Issaquah is surrounded by the Issaquah Alps. You know, we've got 100% tree canopy, you know, in our open spaces. But I want to talk about the urban villages. I mean, they were really designed for minimal resident yards, and the acreage was reserved for the open spaces and the parks and the playgrounds. In my community, you know, our homes are 2,500 square foot of property. So you put a 2,000 square foot home and a driveway and a walkway on there, and maybe 25% of my yard is my backyard. I mean, the current regulation that I have read says I've got to have complete shade in my backyard to comply with this regulation. I don't think that's reasonable for small lots, maybe for a 10,000 square foot lot, but not for a small lot like mine. And my entire neighborhood is that way. The entire neighborhoods up in Highlands are like that. So it doesn't really fit the urban village requirement that you've put in there. I think I'm entitled to a little bit of sunshine. We don't want to live in a cave. So I would encourage you, look at an aerial view of Issaquah and really see how much property these small homes have. And ask yourself, do you really want to mandate that 25% of it is under canopy? So that's my ask on that. I think the other thing I want you to consider is, and I see it all over my neighborhood, the developer put in trees to sell the homes. He didn't care that 20 years later, these trees are now 40 foot and they're 3 feet away from the house. And what a burden for the homeowner, and what a headache to try and go through the city process to remove that. You got to get an arborist report, then you got to go through this owner's permitting, you know, and then you've got to pay a guy with a chainsaw to take it down. And then if you don't want to put one back, then there's the extortion of this tree fund, $1,000 to plant a $1 seedling. Come on, that feels like extortion. So excuse me for getting a little worked up about this, but I would just ask you to consider this. Is this really what the residents want? Or is this overreach in terms of we need more trees? Where did this 4% growth come from? Issaquah is already one of the most populated cities in Washington in terms of tree canopy. We need 4% more. Well, maybe the 4% more needs to go somewhere else, but not in the urban villages. So I would just ask you to really consider not only the environmental perspective, and I know you're asking the environmental board their 2 cents on this, but what about the residents that have to use the tree code, and what do they think of it? One other comment on middle housing. I see it as well-intentioned, but I feel that legislation has also gone too far. I mean, we live in Issaquah because it's suburbia at its best. We've got enough issues with crime and traffic and parking. Middle housing is only going to make this worse. I don't want an ADU in my neighbor's backyard when I live on 2,500 square foot property. I know you got to comply with the state rules on this, but you don't have to overachieve. Thanks for your time.
And thank you. Connie, would you like to speak?
All right, Connie Marsh, I live on Squawk. I love it when Ken gets all fired up. It's fun. And interestingly, being super environmentally oriented, I don't disagree with Ken on the tree code, but I have a little different lens on it. We have examined our tree canopy and included these large open spaces as part of our tree canopy goals in sort of an odd way. And so some of the open spaces with all the trees are making the tree canopy goals higher. I think we need to go back and we need to say, okay, what do we want the tree canopy to look like in those developed neighborhoods? And I don't think that the city's going, oh, well, you have this kind of a lot, so if you have that kind of a lot, you need this much in trees. I think neighborhood by neighborhood, you say, well, what does our neighborhood feel like and what does the neighborhood want it to be? Because we have said that we want all of our neighborhoods to seem individual and like you know where you are when you are in that spot. And so I think the people should have a say in their tree canopy. Now, that doesn't mean someplace can be naked. I think we should be able to have other forms of green that aren't necessarily trees that serve the function that trees do. So my friend Dave Kapler has solar panels and a vegetable garden in his backyard. He's not a fan of trees. He's in Old Town, right? But trees would harm his ability to grow food and create electricity for the grid. And those are both serving functions that we want for climate action that they say is all about trees. We don't need more trees where we already have 90% trees. Now, when you talk about the urban villages, it's very interesting because in Issaquah Highlands, we have a component of our comprehensive plan that specifically calls out Issaquah Highlands because the trees that were planted actually never took, and we have a lot of naked hillsides in Issaquah Highlands. Well, let's have a conversation about what that would look like and who should do it. I don't think this is ready for prime time. I don't like going to zoning and looking at the different lot sizes for redevelopment. I think that the simplicity of replacing a tree with a tree is at least viable for people who are taking down hazard and nuisance trees at this point, and that's easier than what's in the code. So go ahead and put that in, but take the rest of this holistic change out and wait for the tree inventory study, wait for the neighborhood visioning that you're going to do. We actually have visions for our central Issaquah plan neighborhoods already. I don't know if you've looked at that lately, but they fairly well define what we expect the characters of central Issaquah areas to be. And so use that type of a thing instead for the moment. I had another thing and it's totally, absolutely gone. Oh well. You'll probably see me again. Thanks.
Thank you, Connie. Thank you, Ken. I believe that's everybody in the room, but Amanda, do we have anyone online that would like to speak?
No, Chair, we do not.
Okay, well, thank you to our speakers. So we are going to move into our first item of regular business, which tonight is a public hearing. These are the Title 18 Policy Code amendments. And the purpose of this public hearing is to provide a formal opportunity for the public to comment on these proposed amendments. We're going to open this public hearing. It'll be followed by a presentation from staff, and then the PPC can ask for follow-up questions. We'll take public testimony, close the public hearing, and then the Planning Policy Commission will have an opportunity to debate and make a recommendation if they choose to. Kristen Leeson, our principal planner, will be presenting this evening. Kristen, when you are ready, please go ahead.
Hello, as Jason just mentioned, I am Kristen Leeson, principal planner with the Community Planning and Development Department. And yes, we are going to hold a public hearing tonight on the proposed Title 18, also known as the Land Use Code policy amendments. So I will make a presentation, then we will take public comment, followed by deliberation. Actually, I skipped the questions part. So I will make a presentation, then you all can ask clarifying questions. Then we will take public comment, you all will deliberate, and then, as he stated, make a recommendation if appropriate. So we're doing this because we updated the code in 2023, Title 18, we updated it, complete overhaul, and we want to make sure it's good. So this is all about quality control. And we keep a running list of amendments that need to be made, and we are going to continue with this next year and the next year to make sure it is good. So this round of amendments we broke into 3 different parts. There are minor amendments, which are really more clarifying. There are state-required amendments, and there are policy amendments. Those are the ones in which you guys in which you have the opportunity, more of an opportunity, to discuss whether or not this is the right thing for the city. I'm going to run through these by category, and I won't get into detail on each of them unless you have questions. First one is adult family homes and daycare centers. It simply was confusing. They were allowed outright in single-family zones, and yet we said that they needed to get a home business occupation or a home business license, which makes no sense. So we are removing the home business license piece since they are allowed by right and simplifying that. Legislative action exemptions, we required things like notice of applications for legislative citywide projects like the land use code. Nobody to send an application to. We required posting. Not quite sure where we post these things. So what we have done is added exemptions, just 3 of them, to the process. We still have to notify in the paper, we still notify on the website, we still notify through agendas. Land use permit extensions, land use permits had the opportunity to prematurely expire before construction permits were issued, so we've added an automatic extension of land use permits until a building permit has been, a complete building permit application has been submitted. Our table of, and you see there's an asterisk by that one, and I'll get to that in a second. Our table of permitted uses, we just had several uses that were omitted during the Title 18 update, so we actually had one of our friends go through all of our tables of permitted uses and figured out what was missing, and we are putting those back, we have put those back in. In addition, we added which you all have already seen as a part of the co-living amendments, we added in co-living and single-room occupancy, which, yeah, like I said, you've already seen. As for the changes in the land use permit extensions, we changed the word construction to building because construction can mean site work or building. And so we just wanted to clarify that it's just the building permit. You have to have a complete application. And then to the table, which is right above it in the same section, we added that site development permit, you have 3 years to submit a complete building application. And then for a larger site development permit, you have 5 years to submit a complete building application. That was just to help clarify even the sentence. Parking corrections, we had omitted senior and assisted housing during Title 18 updates, so we added those back in and updated the ratios on some of the new stuff that we had done during Title 18 update. Again, there is an asterisk here I'll get to in a minute, but additional height, I left out a word, applicability. It was just confusing, and there was an incorrect interpretation from the code. So we updated to the previous version. We added an applicability section to make it a little easier to understand. Central Issaquah Development Bonus Program. That whole thing is intended to both get affordable housing and to get open space. Yet we left out the fact that a fee in lieu could be used for affordable housing. So we added that back in. We also took away the administration's responsibility of how those fees are spent. It's the council's responsibility, not the administration's. Electric vehicle standards, the table was out of date with the building code, and the building code's in place, so we just removed it. And then replacement of omitted footnotes. This one you all haven't seen. This is new, but when we were going through the tables, we realized that there were some footnotes that had been omitted as well. And what we did when we did the Title 18 update, we took footnotes that were there and we either added a reference in the table of permitted uses or we put them in as regulations in the code because some of them were regulations in the table of permitted uses which didn't make sense, so we made them as regulations in the standards. So looks like I deleted something. We replaced those as regulations in the code. And these happen to be for office and for office uses, yeah. So the asterisk that was on there was the approval criteria for up to 120 feet. It shouldn't have been changed at all. In an effort to just be consistent, I went through and I said it needs to be 120 feet maximum for, in the mineral resource zone, but that's not the case because our mineral resource uses are in the intensive commercial zone. So it was actually supposed to stay as it was in the mineral resource, as for a mineral resource use. Okay. State required amendments. Do you have any questions about the minor amendments, first of all? Okay. State required amendments. One of those was that we are required to allow existing commercial and mixed-use structures to be converted to multifamily residential zoning, and without meeting all of our typical multifamily development standards. So some of the amendments that we made, parking, we're allowed to require the retention of the existing parking. We can't require more, but can make them keep what's there. Concurrency, they are exempt from doing concurrency. And density, they are exempt from meeting the density standards, except that they can actually provide 50% more units than would normally be allowed within that zone. So if we allow 14 units in a zone, we can now allow 21 units in the zone. Residential parking configurations, these were just, the Washington Administrative Code had many amendments that were required. There were new EV-capable requirements, different exceptions for different building use types, update accessible parking, removed multifamily. We've talked about this one, but moving structured parking requirements for multifamily, we can no longer require that, so that's changing in our code. We now allow grass block pavers to count as pervious surface. And we now have a tree retention exemption. We talked about this one at the last meeting, where if you can't meet both the tree code and the parking code, then parking could give a little bit so that you can keep the trees. Excuse me. Co-living I accidentally put under policy, but that wasn't policy in your table. It's a state requirement. And it requires that we allow co-living in all zones that allow for at least 6 units, and that includes mixed-use residential zones. So we added a co-living definition and single-room occupancy. And then parking, we have an exemption for off-street parking. If they're within half a mile of a major transit stop, we cannot require off-street parking. When we do get to require off-street parking, it's only 0.25 spaces per unit. And the reason is that these are not full units. These don't have kitchens in them. They're typically one room. And so that's why they don't count as a full unit. Typically, it's around 4 or 5 units that count as one unit. So, policy amendments. Wayfinding was the first one. We had a requirement that wayfinding was required with new development, but we didn't have any standards associated with it, so we included detailed standards. Heat pump and mechanical equipment setbacks with recent power outages and so forth, bless you. With people, recent power outages and so forth, we had gotten complaints that our standards were impractical, that the noise levels were too low. They typically need to be, that's typically higher than, say, heat pumps allow for. And that we also have denser residential developments than a lot of other cities or than King County, which is definitely more rural. So we lowered our max decibel limit, and we lowered or did we raise it? Raised it. I have to check. And then allowed for mitigating measures, so if they need to, they can put in additional fencing, additional landscaping. The placement could be further out, and they could just, put it in quiet mode at night. Next, rooster and chicken husbandry. Previously, in Title 18, we had certain regulations for this. We moved to King County's code, which is intended for a less dense environment than we have here in Issaquah. So we added language regarding the age of roosters and chickens, minimum size of lots, size and distance of dwelling shelters from property lines, and we require that they have places to run, that kind of thing. Bees and beekeeping. We joked in-house that we were talking about the birds and the bees. Beekeeping. The King County Code, again, we used to have our own regulations. We moved to the King County Code, which was intended for less dense communities. So we reestablished the previous standards, and then we added some clarity, and we also added noise, we defined a nuisance, defined nuisance, and then provided more enforceability for this. Lastly, common and private amenity space. We also talked about this one last week at our meeting. Currently, we require, developers have said that asking them to do what we are asking them to do is infeasible. It makes their project infeasible. Not meaning that they can't get funding for it, but that they will not benefit from it financially. So we currently require 48, yeah, you can take the box. We currently require 48 square feet of private space with each unit, plus 100 square feet of common space per unit. So it's a total of 148 square feet per unit. Our proposal is to allow a deviation, and that as long as you require 100, still provide 148 square feet per unit, that can be all combined into one space, when to maybe put it all into common spaces, as long as 50% of the units still have 48 square feet attached to them. Okay, so that's all of the proposed amendments. So staff and the administration recommend that you all recommend approval of the proposed Title 18 policy amendments as presented. That's all I have. Do you all have any questions?
All right. Well, thank you, Kristen. Any questions from the commissioners? Yeah.
Commissioner Grass. We've gone through all this before, so thank you for summarizing it again. What's different than the last time? I'm just trying to, because then we could talk about some of what's been changed since we saw it last. That may be more.
Just those few things that I mentioned.
Okay. Right.
That micro units were removed as a type of co-living housing. We already had micro units in our code, so we just pulled them out as part of the definition of co-living and moved it back to an individual use. The approval criteria, this should not have changed at all. It should have remained as increased height up to and including 120 feet maximum for mineral resource use and not for the zone. And then the last one is this one that we originally called this a construction permit, and we now call it a building permit for more specificity, and then added to the table that complete applications had to be submitted within that time. Okay.
Any other questions? Commissioner Adair?
Hi, I have a question about beekeeping. My brother's a beekeeper, and he was just wondering why it was June and not July. He thinks it should be July. And so, who was consulted? That's all. Where did
I don't know who the consultant was. I don't even think we had a consultant. I know that we referred to other cities to see what they do. I can't tell you why it's June over July, but may I ask you why it should be July and not June?
I can double check with him and send that
Okay.
to you. His suggestion, just for reference, was that it would become July, and that you cap the number of spawning hives they have during reproduction season, because he said it could get out of control if you don't.
Thank you.
So I can follow up with you on that.
Thank you.
Did not know that. Any other questions for Kristen? All right. We will go ahead and open the public hearing at 6:59 PM. And Amanda or Kristen, has anyone signed up this evening to give public testimony?
No, but there might be someone in the audience that would like to make a comment.
Connie, do you want to speak?
Hi, Connie Marsh again. I would have liked to have had that presentation in advance so that I could have commented on it. I couldn't read it, and I just don't like coming to a public hearing ill-prepared, and now I feel ill-prepared. So with that, I'm going to tell you what made me grumpy before, but it has new information now that went so fast that I don't understand whether it's resolved or not. And that is extending the site development permit and master site plans if you have a complete building application. And so there was a new table that was put up saying that you had to something with a complete application, 3 years and 5 years. However, we also in code have the ability to extend applications. And for example, the school district just extended their application, which then triggered them not having to do master site plan or site development permit. So what this is doing is this is stretching out the amount of time that they get to use old code, because if you have to go back and change you have a major modification for your master site plan or site development permit, or you have to go back and do a lot of rework, you might have to go to old code. If your permit expires, you definitely have to update your code. And so I don't think we need that long of a period of time to allow people to use old code when best available science and all kinds of other things are shown in, supported in new code. So the amount of time, how long should a person be able to, a place be able to build with that permit in place? 3 years, 5 years, 20 years? And so without understanding what it actually says, I'm having a hard time forming an opinion, but I think that would be a great conversation to have, to ask exactly what that means and ask about the ability to also extend the application, not in addition to the extensions they allow. Okay, that felt like absolute gibber, so I apologize.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak for the public hearing? All right, well, looks like nobody else in the room, so Amanda, it sounds like we have somebody online.
Yes, Chair, we do. Kyler, I am unmuting your line.
Kyler Danielson, I'm a land use project manager for Lakeside Industries, which is a family-owned company with deep roots in the city. Lakeside owns and operates an asphalt plant and a mine in Issaquah, and our headquarters are also located in Issaquah. And I originally signed up to make a comment on the mineral resource use and mineral resource zone change language. And Kristen actually already mentioned this during her presentation and made the change that I was hoping she would. And so I am just commenting to thank her and to support the edit there. We recognize all of the hard work that this team has put into these code revisions and the original drafting, and appreciate your efforts, and just thank you.
Kyler, all the comments for online, thank you.
All right, and thank you to our speakers this evening. So, if no one else is going to speak, and I will leave it open for a moment, if we had somebody walk in the room. Oh, would you like to speak for the public hearing regarding the Title 18 policy amendments? Okay, there's not a public hearing tonight, so this is the only opportunity to talk. We've already taken general public comment. But there's definitely an exciting discussion about tree code coming up. So. All right. Okay, well, having said that, we will close the public hearing at 7:04 p.m. There is formal action requested on this agenda item, so in order to begin to deliberate, we will need someone to make a motion. Vice Chair Patterson.
All right, thank you, Chair Voice. I would like to move to recommend approval of the 2025 Title 18 policy amendments as presented.
Is there a second? Commissioner Zakroff, thank you. All right. We can now open up for deliberations. Again, it is a public hearing. We really want to limit questions. We've had our time. I appreciate the speakers bringing new information or new questions, but again, we want to keep questions very limited. Now's the time to debate. Or not. But if anyone has any thoughts on this, please feel free to share. All right, well, I guess I'll chair. Chair Voice. Honestly, this is stuff we've been working on for the past 8 months, and a lot of it we've seen, we've deliberated, we've talked about. With a few minor adjustments, this all is, again, stuff we're very familiar with. I know some of our newer commissioners have caught on to the tail part of some of it, but again, most of this is good house cleaning. Some of this is coming from the state, and the policy discussions. Really, I honestly thought the outdoor living space would have been a little bit feistier, but I guess not. I am a little curious about the math. So just real quickly, because the math, if 50%, right, so if 50% of the units are at 148, the other 50% can use some of their square footage to go to common areas. Is that correct?
Sort of. So all of the units have to have 148 square feet. But for 50% of those units, all of that 148 square feet can be put into common open space, common amenity space.
Okay.
And then the other 50% can have to do 100 into common and 48 on their site, on their unit.
Thank you for that. Again, we need to make it feasible for people to develop our new developments. And again, if that's the feedback that we're hearing from the building community, it's important to listen. I'm okay with all of the amendments. Is there anybody who's not or who would like to make any comments in addition? Commissioner Millender-Irwin.
Thank you. I just have a clarifying question, which is related to a public comment made on the land use permit extension. So most construction takes place where people are living. And so if there's automatic extensions on land use permits, what are the stop gaps to make sure that there's not an eternal kind of construction project going on?
Did you say internal or eternal?
Eternal.
Oh, okay. So, sorry. So the process is you come in and you get your land use permit, a site development permit, typically. And then you get your building permit. And once you get your building permit, that land use, the timeline, there are timelines for each of these things. So the land use permit can last 3 to 5 years. And then you come in and you get your building permit. And once that building permit is issued, that's the timeline that takes over. So there are timelines, but there is no timeline on construction itself. I mean, it takes as long to build a building as it takes as long to build a building. We do have rules in place about noise and hours of operation, many, many, many things. That was updated, I think, last year, the construction rules. So those are in place.
Thank you.
As someone with friends in the development community, I can tell you Issaquah has some very strict rules. Well known for it. We have a special guest. Thank you,
For
Vice
the
Chair
record,
Patterson.
Minnie Dollywall, Community Planning and Development Director. Just quickly want to clarify your question. So, like Kristen explained, there are different phases of, you get your land use permits. Once you turn in your building permit, you're vested to the code because the building permit has come in. And then we do have building code, Title 16, not Title 18, that has time limits built into that. So there are 2 steps there. That's 18 months to actually get your building permit, and then 2 years to build it. There are provisions to extend building permits. The building official has the authority to build them because one-size-fits-all kind of approach doesn't work. If you're building a house versus a larger project, your timelines are going to be slightly different. but those triggers get triggered. So it isn't eternity that you have once your building permit is in. It will sunset because the building code itself is updated through cycles. So there's new building code, energy efficiency and technology changes and those kind of things. We're not changing any of the timelines. This particular provision is just clarifying because the table exists. It says 3 years for STP, and 5 years for STP. What does that mean? It meant that you turn in your building permit. It didn't say 3 years to turn in your building permit. Because it's not 3 years to build your project, it is 3 years to turn in your building permit, and that's the clarifying. So the terms aren't changing, it's clarification of what that expiration for land use means. I hope that's clear.
Very clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Minnie. Yeah, the other thing too is, all developers trying to get these projects finished quickly as possible. None of them are purposely holding them up, so they all have an incentive to make sure they're handing over the keys as quickly as possible. All right, so there doesn't appear to be a whole lot of discussion around these policy amendments. There is a motion on the floor. So, I suppose, help me out here, Kristen, phone in a friend. There's already a motion on the floor. Basically, all we need now is a vote, correct?
Just restate the motion and take a vote.
Okay, so the motion is to recommend approval of the proposed Title 18 policy amendments as presented. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, unanimous.
No, I just wanted to note that these will go to the Planning, Development, and Environmental Committee in July, and then to council, no, I'm wrong, they'll go in June, and then they'll go to council in July. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kristen. So our next item of regular business is to review the proposed Title 18 tree preservation amendments. Doug Yormick, our environmental planner, will be presenting on this topic. So Doug, when you're ready, please go ahead.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Doug Yormick, Environmental Planner. With me is also Minnie Dollywall, CPD Director. And together we're here to continue the conversation for our tree code amendments, IMC 18812. So, little change. This was supposed to be a hearing, and Environmental Board wants another touch at this, so this is now an opportunity to just provide an update on the tree code that CPD staff has been working on with our environmental consultants, Facet. Just some quick background. So we updated our land use code in 2023. Several changes were adopted as part of that overhaul, and one of those changes was replacing tree density on site with a tree canopy coverage requirement to help with achieving 55% canopy coverage goal that's in the Climate Action Plan. Since adoption, staff have identified several areas in the tree code that require updates for better implementation, provide some equity with property owners, and then some consistency. Council 2 heard these concerns and have asked staff to prepare tree code amendments. And then we worked with our environmental consultants on updating the code, establishing new canopy requirements, and presented to both Environmental Board and Commission last month. So in our April 9th environmental board meeting, we were provided 7 areas of feedback to go back and evaluate our tree code. And during this presentation, I'll show you these items and how we've either addressed them or provided responses to the environmental board. First item was code testing, and staff have begun to develop a plan for code testing. We are going to utilize similar approach to missing middle for code testing, and we will be evaluating our tree code to a variety of different development types and areas in the city, and then cross-reference them with other standards just to make sure that there is no conflict between the tree code and our other development standards. The results of the code testing were going to be presented to council committee in July. We'll probably have some code testing information for you at the next Planning Policy Commission in July, if I'm remembering correctly. Another item was just clarification on how the tree fund is utilized, how we get money. So kind of developed this little slide here. So when planner will invoice an applicant if they're going to be utilizing fee in lieu, that fee is $1,000 per tree. That was worked on between our department and our urban forester, Dan Hintz, and that is we determined that was the cost of the tree and for 3 years of maintenance by park staff. So planner will invoice the applicant, it's deposited into a dedicated fund, and then that money is dispersed by the urban forest supervisor in accordance with the criteria that's outlined in the tree preservation code. There was significant discussion on heat island effect, and a lot of this is handled in the urban forest management plan. This slide shows kind of the heat disparity map that was created as part of that urban forestry management plan. Old Town and Central Issaquah have the highest heat disparities. Our forested hillsides have the lowest. Tree installation will be prioritized in areas that have higher heat disparity, and then our urban forestry program will focus on tree installation in those specific areas. Multifamily canopy targets were also an area of focus during that April 9th meeting. But at this time, we don't propose any changes to the multifamily canopy targets, which are at 40% for the multifamily high and multifamily medium zoned properties. We want to collect more data on at our next tree canopy assessment, which our department is working with parks on getting something set up for this year. Multifamily zone properties are primarily located in Old Town, along Newport and East Sunset Way and along Front Street South. These properties are already developed with multifamily housing, and if these sites were to be redeveloped, they'd be subject to strict district standards, 50% max impervious surface, extensive landscape requirements, and they would also have to retain 35% of the caliper inches on site. So taking all of these things together, there would be a preservation of significant canopy coverage for those sites if they were to redevelop. And then wildfire mitigation. We discussed wildfire mitigation with Eastside Fire and Rescue, and we'll continue to coordinate efforts to balance city goals for safety and the environment. In this code amendment, we did add language to to the approval criteria that would allow a wildfire mitigation report to be submitted for the purposes of tree removal for wildfire mitigation. These assessments are done by Eastside Fire and Rescue, and they follow best practices by the National Fire Protection Association and the Institute for Business and Home Safety and the U.S. Forest Service. But these recommendations are primarily just guidance. Future state standards regarding wildland-urban interface may not align with this, so if we end up getting some state standards for the wildland-urban interface, we would have to come back and revisit this with a future code amendment. And also the wildfire mitigation report may result in a site canopy less than the targets that we would have in the proposed amendments. Large project process. This is for our larger managed sites, such as HOAs who have extensive open space. And so we explored having a separate process which would include possibly some sort of management plan that would be submitted to the city. Instead of having that, what we did was we changed our internal process to allow one permit for multiple parcels, because that was something that we heard from these HOAs, is if they had multiple open spaces and they were trying to manage their trees, they would have to submit a tree removal permit for each of the parcels. Now we'll just be asking for one permit and have them kind of provide details of where these trees are located, even if they're on multiple properties, and then we would be able to track it through that instead of having them submit multiple permits and add costs. As part of this, we're also trying to identify areas within the city for off-site tree plantings. So our department has been working with parks to coordinate suitable off-site planting locations if you can't plant on-site within each sub-area or neighborhood, with an emphasis on expanding tree canopy in areas that have the highest heat disparities. The sites on this slide represent our preliminary discussions for sites within central Issaquah. More will be identified as discussions progress. We're also exploring right-of-way plantings in locations to assist in heat disparities, especially in central Issaquah, where we have the highest heat disparities. And these conversations will continue to identify more locations. So last week we had another meeting with the environmental board, and we received additional feedback. So over the next couple of weeks, staff will work to address the feedback from the environmental board, and we will hold another meeting with the board next month. And then during our discussion with the commission last month, we heard the following feedback. And what the main one that we heard was that we are placing the burden of achieving our canopy coverage goals of 55% too much on to single-family residents, especially when compared to multifamily or commercial properties in the city. So similar to multifamily, we don't propose any changes for single family at this time. Again, we want to collect new data and kind of be able to fine tune the canopy coverage for these single family homes. So this will also be part of the effort that we're working on with parks to have a new tree canopy assessment sometime this year. But we're also only proposing the tree canopy targets to be met for single-family properties for new and redevelopment. So if you're coming in for a tree removal permit to remove a hazardous tree or a nuisance tree, we're not asking for full canopy coverage requirements at that time. If your site is below, it's just, we're asking for a 1-to-1 ratio for a significant tree. And for the methodology to come up with the canopy targets for single-family, we worked with our environmental consultants, and we looked at both lot sizes and the potential planting area. And again, just like with the multifamily, there are district standards for single-family. The maximum impervious surface for single-family zoned lots, depending on which zone you're in, is between 30 and 50%, leaving a lot of space that could be used for tree plantings when compared to other land uses. So timing and next steps. Environmental Board would like another touch at this, so we're going to continue to refine our proposed amendments and bring them back to Environmental Board on June 11th. And then following that, we will come back to Planning Policy Commission for a public hearing on July 10th, which will push Council Committee to September and then Council adoption in early October. So in your packets, we have 5 policy questions for you to consider for our next meeting in July 10th. And then with that, any questions?
Great, thank you, Doug. Commissioner Krass, is that a hand?
I feel like it's a game show. I always have to buzz in first. Hi, thanks. I have 2 questions. They're not related. The first one, thank you for talking about single family and the burden there. If I remember from before, I think the smallest designation was 10,000-foot lots and smaller. Is that right, or is it?
Yes, that's correct.
One of the speakers made a very good point. There's a lot of lots that are smaller, so does it make sense to have a 5,000 and smaller and have a different view on that? Because there's a very big difference once you put a house, a driveway, between a 5,000 or less and a 10,000. I think that may be worth kind of revisiting. So that's a question and a statement all together. So first I'll start with the question. Do you have the ability to have another designation for, I would call, very small lots of 5,000 and less?
I would say most of our very small lots occur in the urban villages where we reduced the tree canopy. So in Ken's instance, in Tallis, it was a 73% canopy coverage requirement for that neighborhood. Now, for Tallis, it's 25%, regardless of what the lot size is. For the single family, these are for lots that are zoned specifically for single family. Yeah. So this would be our single family small lot, single family duplex, single family estate zoned lots. And those thresholds were chosen because those tend to fall in line to where those particular, for those zones, those are the lot sizes for those particular zones.
But two things on that. At a 3,000 square foot lot, use that as an example, which may have been brought up, 25% is still significant once you have all the other stuff that has to fit on that. And it's actually more than that, because if you look at, like Issaquah Valley, you have a lot of infill where you can have 2,500 square foot lots. So you have, house taken out and then split into multiple lots, all very small lots. It's probably even hard to get to 25% on those. So it's just something I would love some more thought on that. The other question I have is, when you think about the heat issues in town, what'd you call it, heat disparity?
Yes.
Okay, is that the correct term? When you think about that as an issue and also having more tree coverage there, what's the thought of the city-owned land, specifically the parkways, taking on some more heavy lifting of the city putting in more parkway trees to get canopy, but also getting more greenery in areas that have more concrete? And we'll always have more concrete because that's why we're purposely putting more development there. So is there thoughts on a bigger push on city-owned, I use parkways as one example. Also along the trails on the old Rainier Trail and all that. You could probably do a lot more. So thoughts on that?
A lot of that would be handled under either the street standards, which is Public Works and I'm talking specifically for right-of-way trees and even trails, because our trail standards will be included into the street standards. So there's a lot of room to provide canopy coverage, especially over the right-of-way. The Title 18 and specifically this tree preservation code is more for individual lots. So once we get into areas like right-of-way, that's outside of what we can handle or what we can do in the land use code, and that would fall into.
But the more you do there, the less burden you then have on the individual lots. So it's like, once again, it's the balance. If
Yeah.
there's more heavy lifting in all the parkways, then the thing right across the sidewalk may have a little bit more relief where it's probably harder to do. So I think it's looking at that more holistically, because you have a goal for the whole city, which includes all of it.
Yes, and
So-
I believe when I was speaking with Dan Hintz, I think 1/3 of the city is right-of-way. So there's a lot of room there to.
Yeah, it'd be good to have an
provide coverage.
assessment of what can be done, what's the gap of what it is now versus what it could be, and then does that help you on some of the other goals? So that's the only thought.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hi, can you talk about the multifamily limit again? Because I think you said 40%, but on our grid, it says 25% to 30.
May have misspoke. It's 30%, and then for village residential, it's 25. And village residential is a zone, I believe is that Central Issaquah? Yeah, that's Central Issaquah. So sorry about misspeaking, but 30%, not 40.
Good catch. Any other comments, concerns? Vice Chair Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a clarifying question on the large project permit coverage, single permit. Just curious, do parcels have to be connected to each other for that to apply, or is there any other criteria besides having like the same developer, I guess?
If they're managed by the same HOA, and this also goes for park properties, because there are several parks in the city that span multiple parcels. So this was also something that we heard from our Parks Department when they would manage trees on, Tibbetts Valley Park, for instance, and would have to submit 4 separate tree permits because each of the trees were on separate lots. Now, since it's managed by parks, or if it's an HOA managing Talus's open space, now it can just be one permit to remove multiple hazardous trees or nuisance trees on site.
Gotcha. So as an example, say for your parks example, there's trees in Confluence and trees in Tibbetts. They could still use one permit since they're the same?
No, in that instance, that would be 2.
Got it,
Just
okay.
because it's 2 separate parks. But if it's all one park spanning multiple parcels, it would just be one permit.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Adair?
Can you talk, so you were mentioning revising the canopy coverage goals. Can you talk about the methodology that you're going to be using going forward with that?
So our methodology looked at existing land uses and how they were developed, and then looking at what the potential planting area is. So how much space can that site actually hold for more trees? So when you have areas that are commercially, they're commercial land uses with 80 to 90% impervious coverage, there's not a whole lot of space left on site to plant more trees. So looking at that, because there isn't a whole lot of potential planting area, there's not a whole lot of space for canopy coverage. Those were looked at is to try to establish some sort of percentage. Because what we were utilizing before was taking whatever the canopy coverage goals for that neighborhood and then applying them to each individual lot. So this is looking at it in a different approach.
Thank you.
Commissioner Matthews.
Hi, I saw a comment come through about a neighborhood where 2 trees came down, where they had eagles nesting in the trees. And I was wondering in the permit process, because you can't really look at a permit application easily, you have to actually sign in and start one. Is there a process for ensuring that if there are birds, like eagles nesting, that those trees don't come down until after the nesting period? Because I know for sign permits, if there is like a bird, like an osprey nesting on a sign, this happened to me a while ago when I did the 76 sign, we couldn't touch that sign until the ospreys actually left the region. So is there a process to ensure when permits are issued for trees, that they check for nesting and wildlife before, and that they establish a period on when those trees could come down?
Currently, we don't have information in our system for, we have like ospreys or other birds of prey or eagles. So that would be something that we would have to discuss internally on how we would be able to acquire that information and then set some sort of policy for that. But currently, we don't have that information when we're reviewing for a tree permit.
So as a follow-up, maybe it requires like a site visit when you're bringing down significant trees, that an inspector goes out just to make sure there's no nesting. I mean, because that's pretty obvious if there's a giant nest and a bunch of trees.
Yeah, just to piggyback on Commissioner Matthews, I was actually shocked when I saw that because I thought it was illegal to take down a tree with an eagle's nest. I mean, again, not to impugn the person who sent the message by any means. I don't know if they made a mistake or, but again, that was shocking because I know for years, I mean, you can't even pick up an eagle feather. So I heard you took down the nest. It was like, whoa, that is a major foul.
So when someone gets a tree permit, does someone go out? Is there a site visit always, or sometimes, or never?
We have an inspector who will go out to ensure if there's a replacement tree, that tree was installed, but not every permit has a site visit.
Commissioner Allender.
And there is a review by an arborist, is that correct? And would the arborist's scope of work include noticing whether there were nesting birds?
For a tree removal, an arborist report, typically for a hazardous tree, it's just going to be a track form, which is just going to show, provide some information and then make a recommendation on its overall risk assessment for hitting a particular target. Their evaluation should probably see that and then provide that information to us. But when it's just a track form, there's no way for us to really know unless they're telling us that there is a nest in that tree.
Is that something that we can require as part of the arborist report?
Yeah.
May that be one way to address the issue?
Okay, well, we should probably start getting through Doug's policy questions. So unless you guys have any other questions, let's go ahead and start with question 1. So does the commission agree with the new tree canopy coverage percentages based on zoning, lot size, or should they remain based on neighborhood? Any thoughts on that? Commissioner Krass. Thanks.
You have to do both in many ways. You have to take into consideration lot size, otherwise it just doesn't work. For the conversation we just had on a very small lot as an example versus other size lot, unless you take that into consideration, you can't have a neighborhood-only type, unless someone can explain that, how that would work. So I think having a lot size is core, and then maybe there's an overlay, it's not an or, it should be an and have an and of what does that mean from a sub-area or neighborhood as well. But I think I would think there's a component of both in there.
I would agree. I think hearing our public speaker this evening, also just common sense is, again, you're going to have smaller lots. And the idea that, and I understand what you guys are doing with the neighborhoods, right? So I think a Montreux, they're much higher, but they lose a couple trees, it doesn't affect them. But it could affect someone on a smaller postage size lot. So I kind of agree with Commissioner Krass, is it's got to be looked at holistically in order to get where we want to go. It's got to be user-friendly for the people that are using it, because again, as much as I love trees too, I'm surrounded by them, and I get a very brief little bit of sunlight every day, but usually I'm in the shade. Works out great in the summer, but not so much in the winter. Any other feedback for question 1? Commissioner Zakharoff.
Yeah. I'm also kind of like walking in my mind through my neighborhood. It's in the Highlands, and I'm thinking about the different parts of the Highlands and different tree canopy there. And there are some lots where I don't even see it visible to get like more trees there, or any trees there. So the lots are very small. Like there's literally a house and then just a driveway together, and that's it. So yeah, I also have a question there for the size of the lot. Thank you.
So just so if I understand this correctly, Doug, so like in central Issaquah, the tree canopy coverage is much less because obviously that's where our growth is going. So I'm thinking of some of the smaller houses down by Memorial Park. They're not going to be required to have the same canopy coverage per lot or per neighborhood, as it is now, as a new development outside of that. Okay. Just want to make sure
turn my microphone back on. Why we are in conversations with parks is to have suitable off-site planting locations, so where if it isn't feasible for you to have the tree canopy coverage because your lot is very small, there's more options for you to be able to plant off-site. We have that option in our code, but we don't really provide any space for that. We kind of talk back and forth between the applicants, parks, try to get a spot if there is one, and also as another resort too is the fee in lieu.
Right, it seems burdensome on residents, with all the costs that they have, that all of a sudden now they're being asked to pay possibly a few $1,000s in order to do fee in lieu when they're building in an area that's already has a lower requirement.
Yeah.
Would anyone else like to go other than Commissioner Krass? Commissioner Krass.
I don't think I heard any of this discussed. Is there thought between deciduous versus evergreen and what you want to see, and are the requirements the same, or like what Jason was saying was in the summer having coverage is nice, but at least deciduous trees lose their leaves, so he can get his winter tan if he really wants to go outside onto his porch. What is the thoughts of deciduous versus evergreen as part of the tree code, or is that not part of it at all?
Currently in the tree code, our preference is for evergreen. Deciduous would be okay too. And we have a preferred tree list as a resource to use for you to be able to select the tree. But preference is evergreen, but we're not going to stop someone from planting a deciduous tree. It just we would just be looking at the canopy, the mature canopy coverage of that tree.
So follow-up is, why is there a preference on that? Because if we want to, like in the winter where it's dark here, having deciduous trees maybe you have the best of both worlds, where you have nice coverage in the summer, but then it also allows some sense that you're still outside a little bit without being in a cave. So I'm curious the thought pattern of why evergreen? I'm familiar with the tree list. The tree list has both, so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Tree list has both. Evergreen that's the dominant tree species in western Washington forests, so that is more than likely why it was selected, but like I said, we're not, like, it's our preference for evergreen, but deciduous would be suitable if
Would it-
that's what you wanted to plant.
I was gonna say, because like in urban areas, deciduous may, I mean, that's not a forest by definition, so.
Yeah. And then for right-of-way trees, they're going to be deciduous.
Yes, you have. All right, let's move on to question 2. Does the commission agree that the full tree canopy coverage requirement should only be required for new development or major development?
This is, yeah. Sorry.
I'm looking at my
I'm going to
packet.
pull that up.
Oh, I apologize.
I just realized my mistake. Thank you, Minnie, for pointing that out to me. The presentation has the wrong policy questions on it, so.
Good catch.
They're in a different order.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, good catch
I'm
by
going to
the
build on
commission.
Doug's really quickly while he's opening that up. Deciduous trees also, yes, they're native to Issaquah, or not to Issaquah, to the area, but they also have year-round environmental benefits. You know, carbon monoxide and that sort of thing. If you lose your leaves, you know, in the winter, you're not serving the community, you know, environmentally as well as you would be with the deciduous trees that keep all of that functioning year-round.
All right. Commissioner Matthews.
What percentage is considered major redevelopment? I think I might have asked this before, but I don't recall.
It's 50% of the King County assessed improvement value over a 3-year period.
Thanks. Commissioner Adair.
And so with that question, it would still be kind of by default a 1-to-1 replacement, but they wouldn't, right, but they only have to reassess, they only have to meet canopy requirements if it's a new development or major, but you would still have to do a 1-to-1 replacement if you removed a tree, correct?
Yes, correct.
Vice Chair Patterson.
I'm supportive of this requirement only applying to new development or major redevelopment, just for a couple reasons. One, to not penalize the existing, or what's going on currently, and mostly because those scenarios of new development and major redevelopment outside of a bomb cyclone are probably the most most common opportunity for loss and restoration, meaning that's when you're going to see a lot of trees taken away, and a lot of an opportunity to add more trees would be during those new development or redevelopment phases. So I think I'm personally supportive of that.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other comments on question 2? Moving on to question 3. Does the board agree that tree replacement for tree removal permits for hazardous nuisance trees should be a 1-to-1 replacement for non-landmark trees and a 1-to replacement for landmark trees? Commissioner Adair?
So just to clarify, so it would mean you'd replace 1 landmark tree with 2 regular trees, 2 new trees, correct? If you removed it. Okay,
Correct.
then I think that's fine. I agree with that.
Commissioner Allender?
I'm also supportive of that.
any other comments on number 3? I just say my only concern with number 3 is for a nuisance or a hazardous tree, my concern is the one-to-one replacement. I'm not as concerned with the landmark tree. People can have the reasons for needing one of those to move. It's really just, does that create an issue where people ignore hazards and potential problems if they're worried about something like this? I don't know if it really does. $1,000 doesn't seem like a lot, but there's some people that just let it fester. That's my only concern there. I don't know if that's a valid concern, but if I'm a property owner, maybe you just let it go. The tree is dead, it has issues, but you don't really want to pay the city the one-to-one ratio. So that's my only concern about that as far as nuisance trees. The landmark one, I don't know if it should be one-to-one because again, if we're talking about trees that are hazardous or a problem. So again, I just wonder about that consequence where people put something off that does become a problem. Like you had mentioned earlier, it becomes a life or property issue. Oftentimes people are faced with something like going through permits or doing something like that or paying money. They could just look the other way. That's my only concern with this. Commissioner Matthews.
To piggyback on what you said, in one of the environmental, some of the questions they came through from their meeting was about providing assistance in cases like that. So, or basically it was about if there's a bomb cyclone or a tree falls over, that we would help, or the city would help cover the cost for that new tree, and maybe that's an option that we could bring forward with these landmark trees, because typically I could see the 1 to 2 because landmark trees are usually quite large, and the only reason it would become a nuisance tree if it got sickly or if part of it fell off and it wouldn't survive. So I think that maybe that would be something we should think about. Since they brought that forward, I thought that was actually a pretty good idea.
If there was a fund, Doug, for something like that, would that be something that would be able to support like a fee in lieu, to be able to help people that might not be able to afford it or encourage people to not let problems fester? Like if that's part of the fund, could that be something to help subsidize some of these trees that, again, I don't know if that's a valid use for fee in lieu funds, but.
So I'm pulling up that code right now just to look at it to see if there's anything related to what you're saying. And there isn't one in any of the 7, but then there's, the last one is other purposes relating to trees as determined by city council actions. I think it's something that could be considered.
Open to
but
interpretation.
I think it would be
Fair enough.
I think that would be a larger discussion on how the city would want to use the money collected for the tree fund.
Okay. Commissioner Adair?
And wasn't at the last meeting, there was a discussion about the tree giveaway programs. So maybe that could be part of it, where since you're giving away free trees as part of this promotion, that people who lost trees or have to remove dead trees can apply for a free tree replacement.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, and that's managed through Parks. Dan Hintz is the person who kind of mobilizes that, so.
Okay. Any other comments on question 3? Commissioner Kraus? No, wait, nope, never mind. There looks like there's 2 number 3s, Doug, so.
There is.
I'll read question 3, part B. Does the commission agree to allow flexibility from tree preservation requirements for central Issaquah sub-area? If so, does the commission have any feedback on the proposed approval criteria for such flexibility?
Did we miss that part of the presentation?
I presented on that the last meeting. It was included in the packet, but it was not in the presentation. Yeah. Yeah, it's just, forgive the scrolling right now. I'll get to that section. So this is in the proposed amendments. So we added a section in here, allow deviations to this chapter, and this would pertain to properties within Central Issaquah. So, and this would be for new and redevelopments. Infill development is mostly what we're looking at here, and to make this bigger. Sorry. Yes, I can do that. Okay. So with this, we're looking at sites that are already developed or vacant sites that have unsuitable trees. This is the language that we have come up so far. This is a work in progress, looking for direction from Commission, Environmental Board on how we can strengthen this. But essentially, if your site would qualify, you could reduce down to 0% retention. You would still have to meet the canopy coverage requirements for that property, and replace one tree for every 6 inches of caliper inch below that 25%, either on-site, off-site, or pay into the tree fund. And we're looking at this for infill development that might have parking lot trees that are on the site that might not be suitable for whatever development that's going there, or maybe it's perimeter landscape trees, or there's trees that are conflicting with required utilities that would have to come in there. So that's what we're looking at for allowing a deviation just for Central Issaquah. This would not be for citywide.
Thoughts? I think if we're talking about putting all our density in Central Issaquah, I think you're going to have to be flexible. I think you're going to have to allow deviations in order to build what we need to build down there, if that's what we're serious about. So ultimately, I know this is about half-baked. I know there's some language that also has to get cleaned up. But ultimately, again, I think it's got to be part of the process. We don't live in a world where people are going to be able to fashion the developments we want them to bring in here on pre-existing sites without letting them have some maneuverability, with those sites. So while I know this needs a little cleaning, generally in favor for it. Yeah, Vice Chair Patterson.
Thanks, Chair Voice. Yeah, I'm definitely in favor of flexibility for Central Issaquah in particular. My understanding on this one is basically we're shifting from like one-to-one tree replacement more to like the canopy coverage, right? Like you had mentioned, they would still have to meet the canopy coverage with the redevelopment, so that would still occur. We just wouldn't necessarily be counting tree by tree from what was there before.
Yeah. So how a development would work, how a development works. So there's tree retention, so you have to retain a certain percentage of the caliper inches of whatever trees that are on site, and then you have the canopy requirements. This would allow a deviation to the retention requirements, but would not get you out of the canopy requirement. And for properties that are zoned in central Issaquah, the retention is 25% of the caliper inches. And so this would allow you to go below that 25% with documentation, arborist report, demonstrating that you would meet the criteria for this. And then you would have to do whatever landscape requirements are for that development, and then still demonstrate that you are meeting the canopy coverage goals for that particular area, or for that land use.
So theoretically, we wouldn't lose any tree canopy. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody? Commissioner Allender.
I know that the language here is going to be changed and refined, but on paragraph B, I just wonder whether the variation, the variance process needs to be refined such that an applicant can't simply say, we're just going to pay into the fund and not meet the canopy requirements. And I think the language in paragraph B is a little vague on that, if I'm reading it correctly.
Yeah, the intent is not for the development to get out of the canopy requirements. We're trying to have them still meet those canopy requirements. You couldn't pay into the tree fund to get out. You can pay into the tree fund for the replacement trees for the retention purposes, but what would happen is most of those trees would get replaced as part of that canopy coverage, and if they've already exceeded their canopy goals for that particular land use, then the remaining can go into the tree fund at this ratio, 1 tree for every 6 inches.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
But this could get reworded, so I see what you're saying when looking at it.
All right, moving along to wildfire mitigation. Does the commission have feedback on including a standard to allow tree removals based on wildfire risk assessment on a lot-by-lot basis, or wait until wildfire urban interface codes are developed and adopted by the city? Commissioner Millender Irwin.
Thank you. The policy question that's posed here is it appropriate to include a standard to allow tree removals based on the fire risk assessment on a lot-by-lot basis? I come at this from a lens as a large-scale HOA manager, and I think that anytime an HOA makes a request to remove trees, it's almost always tied to 2 reasons. Either addressing a nuisance tree or trees on the property, but also to address some type of wildfire risk mitigation. So I think that a standard being developed in order to give that guidance would be essential, especially for large-scale properties. So I would absolutely agree with proceeding on a lot-by-lot basis in this particular case to give that guidance.
Okay, great. Anyone like to add? Vice Chair Patterson?
Do we have a timeline on the wildlife urban interface codes? No, that's kind of a somewhere down the road thing. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
It's a big
somewhere down the road.
Okay.
Somewhere down the road.
It's 2 years.
Yikes, that's kind of scary. Commissioner Adair?
Yeah, so I was going to ask what Vice Chair Patterson asked, but to jump off of that, if it's 2 years in the 2 years in the coming, I would think that we should do it on a lot-by-lot basis, just because wildfire is just going to become more and more of a risk as time goes on.
That's a great point. To piggyback off Commissioner Adair, yeah, maybe that's the standard until it can be looked at upon once you guys are able to get your hands on the, that risk assessment. So lot by lot until you're able to give us more data. Yeah, good comments. All right, any other comments as far as wildfire mitigation? We're almost done. Are there other changes to consider? I've got something to say there, but we will go and look for more comments first. All right, I'll kick it off, Chair Voice. What I thought was interesting when I was reading the matrix from a lot of the residents is it's hard to say that there was probably a majority that wanted us to kind of leave what had been put in place a couple years ago. But what was interesting is there was quite a large number. I mean, again, I wouldn't say it was like 60-40, and the 40 other percent that said, you know, there needs to be some changes. But what I also noticed is with that majority is their language started to soften, and they started to go, okay, some of these changes are necessary. Some of them are needed. Some of them do look good. I think, well, I know this is a work in progress. There is a lot of work left here, and that is kind of my overall feeling. I'm a little bummed out that we're not going to get to touch this after the environmental board because it's going to a public hearing right after. And I know we're on a compressed timeline. You mentioned that this is going to the city council committee, I believe in September.
Correct,
September,
yeah.
and then going for council adoption a little later. So I guess that's going to be up to the commissioners to really do their homework, because you're going to see this thing probably in a very different form the next time it comes back to us. But I do think there is quite a bit of work. I mean, these are big questions. The only thing I would say is someone who was working on that tree canopy code, it was a big push to go from, I believe it was 50%, Kristen, and we went to 55. And there were comments that weren't completely on board with that. Now, the majority of residents definitely wanted to see that canopy go up. And I think the thinking at the time was, you know, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. But we knew there was going to be some things to be reworked. And I do think one thing this code has to do is it does have to work with residents and builders and developers and the city. And it doesn't sound like it has really functioned as well as everyone had hoped. So I applaud you guys for coming back at it and looking at it. I think it's necessary. Again, just through the questions, and Doug, you've done a fantastic job. But there is a lot more that has to bake in this particular cake. And I just know with the compressed timeline, we're not going to get an opportunity to have Doug do a presentation like this again. So it is going to be very important for that public hearing. And I think for us, it's in July.
Mm-hmm.
You guys really, you know, look at this, tear it apart, and we'll probably have a very long public hearing about the tree code when that comes up. But I will say what was interesting too about the matrix, about the comments that we got, is what I noticed is most of the people, that 40% that really wanted to see some of these changes, they tended to be people that had actually used the code. Whereas the comments that had kept going, you know, we don't want to do this, we all recommended 55%, those had been more people that were worried about policy. So I think those are things to keep in mind. Yeah, that's kind of my piece on it. Like I said, I think some of these changes are absolutely needed. But yeah, we're going to have some work on this when it comes up in July. Kristen?
I believe that in July, there's a way that we can find to get Planning Policy Commission to have two touches on this.
I think that would be great.
Okay.
I think we'd all feel a lot better about it.
Okay.
Yeah, if we can make that happen. Because again, it's a big lift. And again, I think a lot of the intent is there, but obviously there's language that's going to change. There's going to be a few changes. So that would be fantastic if staff could make that happen. Okay. Commissioner Matthews.
I actually had a general comment. I kind of find it a little confusing when I try to think about what the tree code is for, you know, the city, and then you have a parks group, and then you have a forest group, urban forest group. And how does this all come together? I'm not trying to make it more complicated, but I really like maps, and it would be nice to see overlays on how everybody, what their part is, because, you know, when we're talking about maybe we don't have room to plant a tree at the small house, where can we get it? So it'd be kind of nice to just get an overall view of the entire city and how all these departments, and you could do it just with a map and overlays to give people a feel for what the whole goal is for the entire city. So, thank you.
Yeah, that's a great comment. I mean, there's a lot of different players in this, right? You've got the environmental board, you've got the climate action plan, you've got the urban forestry, that new one that just came out. You've got us because of land use. So again, lots of people working on this and trying to make it as best as we can for the city. Commissioner Adair?
And yeah, just to piggyback off of Commissioner Matthews, also some like just sample site plans of what it might look like under the new code versus the old code would be really helpful, so we can see, oh, okay, this is what 50% canopy coverage looks like on a single-family property versus 25%.
Absolutely helpful. All right, any other comments for Doug? All right, Doug, well, thank you for the presentation. It was a great discussion. Appreciate it, everyone. Did you get everything you needed, Doug, as far as feedback?
I did, yes.
Okay, great, thank you. We're going to move on to reports. And I believe, Kristen, you're taking over here? Or is it Minnie?
Do you just want council right now, or do you want?
We just want council right now.
All right,
Yeah.
council. Yay, Monday, middle housing was approved by city council. And Valerie Porter, rightly so, got many, many kudos all around from executive, from council, from everyone. She even got a mug. So yeah, that's done. So that's my city council report.
Excellent. Well, congratulations to Valerie and all the staff that worked on that. All right. Other business and announcements. Are there any announcements to the calendar?
Not to the calendar at this point. I'm going to have to go back and relook at it now. I believe you want to make some, but before you do, I have a couple of brief little things. One is just a reminder, because this commission meets more than any other commission, and you guys are on TV every 2 weeks. It's an election year. So go as an individual and support whoever you would like, wear all the pins you want to when you go to the grocery store, but when you are here as a commissioner, please do not wear any buttons, any clothing, anything representing anyone running for anything, okay? Because you are a commissioner here and you are impartial, right? And then, as you all know, Stephen is going to be leaving the city, and so I will take over once again as the liaison for the Planning Policy Commission, starting now, so please send any comments to me, and you will be receiving all of your correspondence from me. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Kristen. Yeah, I believe that's kind of the big news. And it's not just Stephen, but it's also Doug, and it's also Jen Davis Hayes, who this commission's worked for. We want to say thank you to both Doug and to Jen for their wonderful work for the city, and we wish you guys well on your paths ahead. And then obviously Stephen, who is very special to this commission. I've gotten to know Stephen over the years. He's as gracious and kind and just a fantastic public employee. I think he's going to be sorely missed, and I think Kirkland has acquired just an amazing guy. And I think everybody in Issaquah can speak to what they just got. So I do want to say best of luck to Stephen. I'm sure he'll be great at his new job. And if anyone else would like to say anything about Stephen before, because I'm sure he's watching. He's got to be watching. But yeah, we're going to miss him dearly here. But we're also very thankful that Kristen will be stepping up, also a very familiar face for our Planning Policy Commission. Just don't leave, Kristen. But they do say things happen in threes. So with Doug and Jen and now Stephen, hopefully we're safe for a little while. Is there any comments, anything for the good of the order, the good of the commission that anyone would like to make before we adjourn? Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. We will adjourn the meeting, this meeting of the Planning Policy Commission at 8:14 p.m. Thank you. Yes.